So, if you happen to catch one of my recent live streams where we were reviewing one of the episodes of Rach Talk, there was one story in particular that caught me off guard because I was reacting live on the live stream and I needed to go back, watch it again, and actually get my thoughts in order. She decided to talk about her 9-year-old son and kind of gave a play-by-play of a pretty embarrassing moment that happened to him. So after the live stream ended, I watched that segment again and reacted again privately. And then I reached out to one of my friends, Maryellen Dance, who is a licensed mental health counselor, to come onto the show and talk about this specific story and incident. And some people may argue, well, it was just one story in a 30-minute long piece that Rachel posted onto YouTube, so she wasn't making a big deal about it. It was just one part of a larger piece. Yes, however, Rachel decided to take out this specific story to highlight in her Instagram to promote that Rach Talk. So really, there is no forgiveness on my end because she had the forethought to decide that was the juiciest story to tease the audience, to bring people in to watch the full thing. So even if you weren't going to dedicate 30 minutes to watching her whole Rach Talk, you basically saw all of the embarrassing moments through her stories. So not great. Either way, her son is probably embarrassed, and rightfully so. So what you're about to watch is my conversation with Maryellen. I hope you enjoy it. I was very excited to get your input on this because you are obviously a licensed mental health professional, so you have some insight onto how these things affect children, which then affects us in our adult life. At least that's how I see the world. You're familiar with Rachel Hollis, right? You have some background.
Oh, I have some background on Rachel Hollis. Unfortunately.
Yeah, right? You even said some people were bringing her up in sessions before, right?
Oh my gosh, so much. People would say, well, especially after her first book came out, especially after Girl Wash Your Face, so many people would come and say, well, Rachel Hollis said just believe it. And Rachel Hollis married the douchebag guy, so I should, things like that. And I'm like, oh no. No. She's made this career out of giving advice. And quite frankly, her advice is really unhealthy and damaging. And to me, she just comes across, I don't know her so personally, so I can't say this, but to me, she comes across as very cocky, very self-absorbed, very, I'm going to do whatever I can to make money and to talk about myself and be center stage and get accolades and that kind of thing. That's what it appears like to me. Again, I don't know her personally,
Yeah,
but
same. Yeah, I've learned a lot from Rachel Hollis, but mostly in the sense of what not to do if you want to have a long-term sustainable career.
what I want to know, what I want to ask Rachel is why? Like what made you share this story and what good for your son did sharing this story do?
Yeah, I agree. I would like to know as well. So, all right, we're going to play it now and then we'll talk about it.
Side note, Ford Hollis told me that he ran into, did I tell you about his ex-girlfriend? Did I tell you this story? I really want to tell this story. But I feel like I shouldn't out him. One of my children, his name is Schmord. It rhymes with Schmord Hollis. Schmord Schmallis. He's 9. I don't know how this could get back to him. Came home 6 weeks ago. Elated, joyful, just ready to burst. And Ford is my most feeling child. He is deep in his feelings, and he has been since he was little. In fact, I have a video that I will send you of him. He wanted like an ice cube. He was like 2. He wanted an ice cube, and I wouldn't let him have an ice cube because he's 2 and he's going to choke to death. And he is sobbing his heart out as if I've wounded him to his soul.
How deep is a frog's home? I mean bath.
I don't know. How deep is it?
100.
100. You're hilarious. So Ford Hollis rolls in the house. He's elated. It must be big because, he's not always this, pumped up. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, I have a girlfriend. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, 4th grade is going off. Do tell. And he's like, well, honestly, Mom, I don't know how long it's gonna last. Cause she has had a lot of boyfriends this year, but yeah, I'm the latest. She asked me out. And I'm like, well, that is great. And the whole week, he's just so pumped. You know, he's in 4th grade. So like having a girlfriend means you ask them out and then they say yes. And then you never talk to each other again until you break up. That's what 4th grade relationships are. So he's like super pumped. He's like, I have a girlfriend all weekend long. We're like, yeah. Cut to Monday. Okay. Monday, which is Valentine's Day. Ford makes a special Valentine for his new girlfriend. Got her on Friday. It's Monday, Valentine's Day. Gives her the Valentine. He comes home from school and I'm like, oh my gosh, what happened? Did she love your Valentine? Whatever. Apparently, gives her the Valentine. Sister flips it over to the back, writes on the back, I don't want to be with you anymore, and gives it back to him on Valentine's.
You're as cold as ice.
And I was like dying. I'm like, what did you do? Because I'm thinking, we are framing this. We are keeping this. When this boy is 40 years old, we're going to pull this out every year on Valentine's Day because that's hilarious. I'm sorry. I don't know what you think is funny, but if you don't think it's funny that a 9-year-old got his Valentine's, wrote that on the back, and gave it back to him, like just straight 0 F's given, like, what? That is some cold-hearted. So I'm like, what did you do? Where is it? Like, what'd you do? And he said, oh, I ripped it into 1,000 pieces, and I wish that I could have thrown it into the fiery depths of hell. I shit you not, Jack. I do not know where this kid gets his dramatics from. I wish that I could have thrown it into the fiery depths of hell, but I couldn't, so I threw it in the trash can. What is going on in his class? Okay, so anyway, then he's like bummed because he feels rejected. I'm like, with respect, you literally got this girlfriend on Friday. I'd never heard about her before. You were together a sum total of like 72 hours. I know this was harsh. It'll be okay. Fast forward to last weekend, he's at his brother's baseball game and he runs into her. Okay, she's there, the baseball. And he's like, Mom, I'm not going to use her name. He says, I ran into sister. Well, that sounds weird. It's not a sister. I ran into ex-girlfriend at the baseball game. And I'm like, okay, how'd that go? And he said, oh, I went over to her. And every time I would go up to her and I'd get real close, I'd be like, he would just go into her space and just do that. And I was like, Ford, no, sir. First of all, respect personal boundaries. Secondly, what was the end game here? What was the end game? Did you think that would make her like you? A wild hand gesture and a hamster sound.
She appears to be transfixed.
That was I was like, bro, you gotta be cool. And I don't mean cool like be a cool guy. I mean just chill out. And I just remembered like, man, we are so dumb when we are in elementary school. We have no idea how to act around someone that we're attracted to. And that was me. A year ago today, I invite Boothing over to the house and...
Okay, so that was the whole setup to essentially then talk about her first kiss with her new boyfriend, which I will point out, she's like, oh, my son has a girlfriend for 72 hours. She's had this boyfriend for 1 year. Exactly. Like, this is why she's telling this story, because it was 1 year ago that she had kissed him or whatever. I think in child time, that's about the same. Child versus adult timelines is about the same. 72 hours for kids, a year for adults, you know?
Well, she does like to talk about herself, so it doesn't surprise me that it was, to get back to talking about herself.
Mm-hmm. as most of her stories on her YouTube channel at least do.
And how old is she? 40-ish?
She's about to turn 40 soonish. She's 39, I believe.
So, I mean, not for nothing, but I don't really care about her first kiss.
Yeah, neither do I. I don't think anyone does.
There's a lot of different theories about this, but there's some theories that when people get divorced, they tend to revert back to the age they were when they got with the person.
Really? I've never heard that before.
Just theories. Okay. There's theories around, like when people start using, if someone started using drugs at like 16 and then they get clean at 40, right? There's theories that they kind of revert back. They're kind of like stuck at that 16-year-old age. Gotcha. So there's again, just theories, not saying, but
sure.
The way she's talking sounds like a teenager, quite honestly.
Yeah. And I think okay, here's my take on the video. I think it would be fine if she was telling this to a friend. If she was telling this to someone personally in her life, I don't think like making fun of your kid in a private setting is necessarily like, oh my God, how dare she? I want to make it clear that I'm not against, I think it's relatable to a lot of people. Like their kids say the darndest things, weird things, they have weird experiences. The problem I have is that she's posting it to the public. She's got over 100,000, almost 200,000 subscribers on YouTube alone. Plus she plays these on her podcast where she has many more downloaders, people, subscribers, whatever on her podcast. So you're opening up this kid, this like poor 9-year-old's, maybe it's silly in the grand scheme of things, but to him at this time, it's like the biggest embarrassment of his life. Why do 1 million people have to know about that?
They don't. And I understand, I'm not a parent, but I do understand my parents were like this. I would understand if she had said to him or a close friend of hers, Ford, in 20 years, we're going to laugh about this. Yeah. Like, completely understandable. Absolutely. Put it into perspective for sure. But that's after you ask the poor kid if he's okay. You maybe comfort him a little bit.
Yeah. And maybe she did. Who knows? She didn't talk about that part in the story, which is kind of disappointing because if you're going to use this as a teaching moment, how about say, okay, so after I consoled him and told him this and this and this, then we laughed about it and I said this. She leaves that part out because maybe that's not as compelling or it didn't happen. Who's to say?
She couldn't get through the story without laughing. Like she paused many times to just laugh, which again, like you said, we don't know what happens behind closed doors, but it just makes me a little bit sad. So I love my parents. My parents are great. My parents had a little bit of a suck it up attitude. Like they would be the type to console, but okay, let's move on kind of thing. That being said, I'm going to share a story, and this actually happened to my sister, but I'm going to, be careful not to use her name. Because,
how nice of you.
I know it's like rocket science, but when she was a teenager, she got dumped. She, like one of her first boyfriends broke up with her, and he broke up with her at our house right before dinner. So he's like leaving, and my mom is like, hey, do you want to stay for dinner? And he like not knowing that this had just happened, right? And he says no. And as soon as he leaves, my sister starts crying and we sit down for dinner because dinner was ready. And now, mind you, my sister's probably 15 at the time. And, my parents are consoling her. Everyone's like, oh, this stinks. This is terrible. This is terrible. And then I don't remember who was the first one to say it, but, someone said like this particular meal we're having, it was like steak and potatoes, will now be referred to as the dump dinner.
Oh,
right.
Yikes.
And so then for like a year later, it would be like, what are we having for dinner tonight? Oh, let's have the dump dinner. And my sister was like, this is not okay. This is hurting my feelings.
Yeah. Oh my God. But at least you're not making that like a public outcry, like taking an ad out in the paper and going, guess what, guys? We've decided to make dump dinner.
Well, and that is something I haven't talked to my sister about this in a while, but I know she remembers it. Like that is something that affected her. And that is on such a smaller scale. And I was there. Like my parents were consoling her. We were all consoling her. But like still that affected her, and it affected her years later. So it just makes me wonder, like, how is this going to affect this poor kid? You know, like I want to bet someone money that he talks about this in therapy later. Like I just want to put it out there.
Yeah. And again, like it's the public aspect that makes me cringe the most. And Ford, he's 9 years old, but he's been featured in a lot, at least of Rachel's ex-husband, Dave. He's been featured in a lot of Dave's content. Dave had a show, a quote unquote YouTube show with Ford called Ford for Thought, where they talked about, it wasn't a very good show, but they talked about like childhood stuff. So he's been out in the public as much as any of us are that have YouTube channels. He's been out there. So people, ask the parents about how's Ford, what's Ford doing? So to say that he has no idea how the internet works is not true, because he's been on the internet. And a 9-year-old in today's world, 4th grade, they're on laptops and doing stuff, and on, he plays Fortnite. She's talked about. So the fact that he couldn't find it, I don't think is accurate. And secondly, the second thing I thought about is like, what is the parents of the girl involved? Because I'm sure you could figure out, the class probably has 18 kids in it. You could figure out
Right.
which girl it is. If that person's, guardian, parents, whatever, found this video, wouldn't that be kind of like, oh my God, they're talking about my daughter being a jerk, calling her cold as fuck or whatever. Like that's inappropriate sort of too.
So one of the things that's really concerning to me is at the beginning of the clip that you showed, Rachel says Ford Hollis. She says his first and last name.
Yeah.
And then she kind of makes a joke about it. And what did she say? Like schmord, schmalis or something. So she has awareness that she should not be using his name. She has awareness. She's making it known that she has awareness by making that joke.
Yeah.
However, she continues to do it. And now I'm not saying that like being ignorant excuses behavior.
Sure.
By any means, but like she's saying, I know that it's bad that I'm using his name, but I'm just going to keep doing it. Like that's basically what she said. And so I cannot fathom that. I really just can't fathom that. Like what?
Yeah. And she even says too, like, I really want to tell this story as if like I shouldn't though, but I really want to, but I shouldn't. And she has like almost like the forethought to go, this is not something that is going to be either taken well, which it wasn't, or that I, as a person with ethics, should not tell about my child, but then goes against it and goes, nope, going to do it anyways. It's like, oh.
I actually wrote this down while we were watching it. I wrote down in quotes, she said, I shouldn't out him.
I got nervous for a second. Okay, this is unrelated to this whole thing. There's a whole story because one of her sons, who's older, is into like theater and is more kind of like into her genres. And there was at some point she talked about, being an ally and kind of like insinuated that she understands the struggle of the LGBTQ plus because someone in her family that she takes care of is a member of that. And I don't think she used his name, but she was basically actually outing her son in that. And when she said, I don't want to out him, I thought, oh my God, she's going to tell a story about the teenage son. And then she went to this. So I was like, okay, well, the severity of that would have been worse if she was to out him like that. But I mean, still, like, this is not, either one is bad. But I got nervous when she said those specific words. I was like, oh no, what is she going to say about her son? But
oh gosh,
like their privacy means nothing, basically,
Well, and I'm also under the philosophy that you shouldn't lie to your kids. Now, that doesn't mean that you should tell your kids, what happens between adult things and what happens behind closed doors and things like that. Sure. But like straight out lying to your kids, I think it's teaching them that it's okay to lie, right? Yes, we need discretion. We need appropriate things to talk with kids. Yeah. But she said the words, how could this get back to him? Again, why are we lying about this? Like, I remember various times where I've broken up with boyfriends, or one time I lost a job, things like that happened to me, where my mom asked me, is it okay if I tell so-and-so about this? Yeah. Like one of her friends, right? Is it okay if I talk to them about this? Like, would you mind? And I just don't understand why we're kind of like laughing and glamorizing this. Like, let's keep secrets about our kids from our kids. Like since when is that nice? It's just not nice, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's weird, and it's like, it's like assuming that kids can't see the internet, which is just, if that's your belief, then you need to stop believing that, because it's just they have access. So if that, unless you have
Welcome to 2022.
yeah, if you don't homeschool your kids in a non-electrical house, you have no running electricity, maybe. But the 99% of people are going to school. They're on their phones. They have cell phones, for God's sakes. Like they can see everything.
They have schools are giving out Chromebooks for like online learning. So they have computers at their disposal.
I mean, there's a YouTube Kids. Like, you could have your own channel if you wanted. So, like, the argument, like, well, we are really vigilant about our kids' internet use. Like, okay, bullshit. Like, you can't. Like, they're gonna find it if they want to find something.
Well, and let's say you are vigilant about it. Their friends' parents probably aren't vigilant about it, so they're gonna hear about it.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one part. But I also want to get your opinion on what she was describing, the actual content of what she was saying. So the other thing of the context too. So the kids have just gone through the divorce as well, because kids go through a divorce too when their parents, separate. They've moved from their hometown in California, like I think in 2018, so not that long ago. They made a big move to Texas. The parents are together. They travel a lot, but they're together. Then in the 2020, they get divorced. They split homes. So that's, I think, maybe not traumatizing is not the right word, but a big, a bunch of moving in parts. Like, kids need stability. It could be traumatizing to them. Now Dave has come out and said within the last 8 weeks, so that would have been the right time frame, that he's been in some sort of outpatient mental health treatment, and Rachel's been full-time caretaker again. So dad is who knows where. Maybe they know, maybe they don't. But now it's just with her. The custody schedule has been all different. Okay, having all that in mind, his reaction to this could be a result of all that stuff going on, and she's laughing about it. What do you think, as a therapist, that could, mean for him?
Oh gosh. So I have no idea what it could mean for him, because I've never met him.
Sure. True.
But I think that and I don't know enough about Rachel and Dave's divorce. However, kids, whether they're children or adult children, treat relationships the way they saw relationships.
Okay.
So if they saw their parents screaming at each other, it's likely that they will grow up and get into a relationship where they scream with their partner, because that's what they know. Like, that's what they've heard, that's what they've been around.
Sure.
If they're seeing Dave and Rachel not speaking to each other, they're going to, like, they're internal, like, that's that's hurtful, but B, that's going to be an indicator of how they are then going to respond in their relationships. What I'm concerned about is a few things. First of all, she described Ford as being angry. Now, I would have been angry if someone did that to me too, but what other emotions were around there? Like, does he only know how to display anger? Like, does he not understand how to process sadness? Does he not understand how to process rejection or how to feel that, and like can only feel anger? Like, it just, and again, who knows what happened behind closed doors, but it just makes me wonder, okay, I'd be angry about that too. But have you only been taught how to be angry, or have you been taught how to be other things?
That's a great point. Like, if something bad happens to you, do you not feel like, oh, that I felt the rejection, I feel sad about that? You only feel like revenge. I need to rip this up. I need to make them feel bad. That's interesting.
Right. Like, to me, a 9-year-old saying, I want to throw this note in the fiery depths of hell, like, that's a pretty aggressive statement for a 9-year-old to make. So I want to know a little bit more about that. Like, first of all, where have you heard this phrase, the fiery depths of hell? Where have you heard that phrase? How do you know that phrase? What does that mean? Like, that's an aggressive statement. I want to understand a little bit more about that. Again, it's okay to be angry. I'd be angry too, but I, I want to understand that.
Yeah, let's like break that down a little bit. And I remember when I was a kid, I mean, maybe times have changed, but when I was a kid, I could, if I said hell to my parents, oh no, I had to say double hockey sticks or whatever. HE double hockey sticks was like as far as I could take it, and even that was like, you're crossing a boundary here. Like, you know, you better, you know.
So we couldn't say sucks. We couldn't say shut up. Like, we couldn't say any of those things.
Yeah, to say to the fire.
We couldn't say crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it was with my family too. And I'm not saying that's the right thing or versus wrong.
No.
But to say fiery depths of hell is like, whoa, that would not fly in my head. There'd be disciplinary action taken if that happened.
What does that mean to him? Like, he used it in an appropriate sense. So clearly he knows the appropriate meaning of that. But again, what does it mean to him? Where did he hear that? And maybe this happened, but the first thing I would want to say to this poor kid is like, hey, buddy, that stinks. Like, are you okay? Like, that really, really stinks. That's hurtful. That's just hurtful.
Yeah.
And nothing was, said about that.
Yeah, no, nothing about his feelings. It's only like the story of, I had to witness this. I had to watch this like funny, hilarious thing. It's like, I think you could argue whether it's funny or not. Maybe it's like a haha, like a little chuckle if you were to hear this from a friend gossiping on your porch, whatever. But yeah, in this context, like, I cringed. And the other part that I wanted to bring up too is the framing of it. She wishes that instead of him ripping it up and throwing it into hell, that he would have brought it home so that she could bring it up every year on Valentine's Day to remind him of this social failing. Why would you do that?
Because that's what I love that you just said, social failing, because it makes me wonder too, do other kids know about it? Like, were other kids around and seeing this? Was it embarrassing? I mean, I'm sure even if other kids weren't around, it was still embarrassing, but like, at what level, like, did this happen in school? And again, like you said, if I'm sitting with a friend of mine on the porch being like, listen to what happened to my kid, like, it was hard to keep a straight face, right? We've all had those situations where it's like, oh my gosh, it's hard to keep a straight face.
Yeah.
And like, okay, this little girl is kind of a badass. Yeah. This is how she did this. Like, holy cow. Whoa. Again, I totally understand that. And I understand saying to Ford, buddy, in 20 years, we're going to laugh about this. I hope that someday you'll realize that it won't hurt like this forever. I get saying that. But saying she's going to frame it and every Valentine's Day, she's going to remind him of his first rejection. Oh.
Why? I know. To not do it again. But that's how, if you know the Rachel Hollis brand, that's how she thrives, as she would call it. Like, she has a company called 3% Productions. I don't know how much you know. I have a lot of these factoids, so I'm sorry if you already know this. But she owns 3% Productions, which comes from a story that Dave told her one time, that there's a 3% chance you're going to get that job you just interviewed for. And she said, oh yeah, well, I'll show you. And then she got the job or whatever. But then she internalized that and said, 3% chance I'm going to accomplish it. So she took this, like, him being a jerk, in her opinion, but also I agree with it. He was being a jerk, saying like, yeah, 3% chance you'll get that job. She got it. But then she took the negative message and made it into like this inspirational brand. So in her mind, seeing the rejection from this girl might be in her mind like, oh wow, this is inspiring to do better next time. But kids don't work like that. I don't have a degree like you, but I would imagine, as a former child, as I say, you don't think like that,
As a former child and as a human, we want love. Like, we want love. Like, we all crave love and acceptance. And he did not get love or acceptance.
I wonder if he had some sort of, because like you were talking about, you watch what your parents do and then you emulate to some degree, how important having a girlfriend is. That was like a very important thing to him as to why he would get so affected by it. Because after the divorce, they announced it in 2020, Rachel and Dave, both within that year had found new partners that they were very serious about. Dave had Heidi. They got together like a couple months later. They were traveling back and forth, having the kids do sleepovers together. Like, that's a lot to process. And then Rachel has her boyfriend, Says Dark, who's a tour manager for Shawn Mendes. They got together within the year, because this is the year anniversary. I shouldn't say that. They got together within 2 years of the divorce. So maybe that's like the couple is showing the kids like partner is top priority.
Well, and that's sad. Like, kids seeing these partners, plus kids just having different like adult figures come in and out of their lives. Like, that's just exhausting. I think you make a really good point with that. I think that emphasizes relationships in a different way. Again, I don't know how they're talking to their kids about these new partners. One thing that worries me the most, honestly, is that Rachel is laughing at this girl's behavior. When someone is not nice to us, it's important that our parents tell us, like, this is not nice behavior. Like, it's not okay for this person to treat you that way. That's mean. Like, my parents were very much the like, okay, if somebody's being mean, just like ignore them, walk away, don't be involved. Some other parents have the philosophy of, set a boundary, say something to them, whatever kind of philosophy you are. But I guess one of my fears is that somewhere in Ford's mind, he's thinking it must be okay that this girl was mean to me because my mom's laughing at it and it's getting attention. And like, I'm using the term mean loosely. Like, obviously, like, she can break up with him if she wants, but like writing it on a note, handing it back, like, that's hurtful and that's mean. And it's important to teach our kids what appropriate, nice things to do are. Like, I know I keep using the words mean and nice, but I'm thinking about like talking to a 9-year-old. Like, sometimes we have to break it down in that way. And like, and I also want to bring to the point of like him going up to her at the baseball game and doing whatever he did.
Yeah.
That's not an appropriate 9-year-old response. Like, that's not, it's kind of weird. Like, it's not, I'm not like concerned about it, but it's kind of bizarre.
Yeah.
And so first of all, it's just, I think, incredibly disrespectful that Rachel imitated it. I just find that disrespectful. But also I think that needs to be talked about. Like, okay, buddy, like, are you trying to express feelings? Like, let's figure out how we can express these feelings with our words. Like, let's figure out what would help you express these feelings. So, even if things are wildly different behind closed doors, then what is the purpose of making this your public persona? Like, what is the purpose of that? And it just makes me feel really, really bad for this poor kid. I feel bad that he got broken up with on Valentine's Day. Like, that stinks. I was just going to say, so like, knowing what I know, which is very little, if I were in front of Rachel, I would have a lot of questions about like, what was the purpose? Like, how was sharing this story serving any good? What is the purpose of, laughing at your child? Again, maybe she didn't laugh in front of him, which would be good.
Yeah.
We've all had those situations where we have to kind of like laugh behind our mouths when a kid is doing something ridiculous. But I'm just very curious at her intention behind it and how it's helping, because I cannot fathom how this would help Ford develop in an emotionally healthy way.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on and doing this kind of analysis with me. I appreciate it, and getting your expertise.
Well, thanks for having me. Again, like, just like my opinion, what I would do, which is not necessarily what the next person would do, but I love talking about this stuff. It's interesting to look at, and I think it's important to talk about too, because it's hard when it's right in front of us, it's hard not to compare ourselves. So it's hard, you know, if some of her 200,000 subscribers are parents and they're watching this and they might be like, ooh, I handled it differently. Did I, you know? So I also I think it's important to do these things to help put things in perspective for people who are kind of inundated with these messages that are not really the greatest.
Yes, I agree.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, counterpoint. I always think that. And when people say like, oh, you're just a hater, you're a hater, it's like, maybe, probably, true. But I also think it's important to offer a counterpoint, a different perspective, or else you'll just think that everyone thinks that way. And that's not true.
Yep.
You only hear one version of a story or one version of a situation. Everyone will just assume like, oh, I guess that's the truth. It's like, no, there's other sides, and here's mine. Anyways, how can people follow you? Because you have your own podcast and YouTube channel now. Tell the viewers about it.
I do. Oh, thanks. I do. My podcast is called the Okay-ish Podcast. OKAYISH, and my YouTube channel is also the Okay-ish Podcast. I try to do things like this a lot. There's a lot of really trendy mental health terms going on. People are using mental health terms like so cavalierly these days, and I want to be able to translate those. I want to be able to tell you what they actually mean, kind of educate you, pick things apart, to how these things can relate to you and how they can't relate to you sometimes. So Okay-ish Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and Okay-ish Podcast on YouTube.
Perfect. And I know you have a Bachelor video on there, which is really good. If people are into the Bachelor, which I know is super, super. I haven't watched the last couple seasons, but I watched when Claire got with Dale. And that was about the last one
that was dramatic. So I really want to do more Bachelor videos because the Bachelor franchise is currently really, really feeding off of mental health stuff. Like people in the Bachelor franchise really like to use the word gaslighting. In this most recent season, they did like a group therapy without a real therapist. They did like marriage or couples therapy with like they are like really building on the mental health stuff, and it is all wrong. And so stay tuned. There's a new season of The Bachelorette coming out in June or July, and I'm definitely going to be doing more videos on that again, because we need to understand these things, or else we're going to keep using these terms wrong, and using the terms wrong can actually be hurtful for certain people. So I'm definitely going to do more of that.
Awesome. Well, I'll be watching, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will also be watching. But thanks for joining me for this one. And
Great. Thanks for having me.
Goodbye.